Fuchsman. I am with Education Development Center, EDC. As of a couple of months ago, I now direct this project, the Partners in Prevention project, I should say direct the technical assistance for this project, not the whole project, just the technical assistance, in partnership with Healthcare Foundation of Porte, and of course, RTI being the evaluator. So I want to welcome you all to today's webinar. This is, I know, EDC and our partners at Prevention First, who also are involved with this project on the TA side. We offer these webinars twice a year. And so this is a great opportunity to bring all of you together to share lessons learned. We have great program developers here joining us as well today to talk to us about everything that they know and have been thinking about in terms of helping and supporting all of you implement your programs. So let me just advance the slides. Can everyone see my slides? A big welcome. Great. And let me just make sure I can move them. There you go. So I thought we'd first just start with brief introductions. So this is obviously the Greater LaPorte area, and I just wanted to see who's here today. So I'll start, and I'm sorry, I still don't know everyone's names. So and not everyone has their actual names spelled out. So I might call on you and just ask you to tell me your name. But Ray, I see you're the first person on my screen. So just, do you want to say, you know, who you are, where you're from, and anything else you're excited to learn about today?
Well, my name is Ray Silvis. I'm from Michigan City area schools. I'm the program coordinator for the Partners in Prevention initiative. And I'm just here to kind of listen and take in some, some feedback from what we're doing, but also learning some things from what other schools are doing and learning from the presenters and trying to see if I can, gain some more knowledge to help, our initiative run a little smoother. Great. I mean, it's pretty smooth now, but just any tips would help.
Great, thanks.
We can always get better.
Yep. Sarah Fine, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Fine from the LaPorte Community School Corporation, and I'm here too to learn, to listen and see the different perspectives and the information that's going to be shared out and how that can benefit and continue to move us forward.
Great, thanks, and welcome to you. And I see there's a name, Debbie Carpenter / Nick Schmidt.
Yeah, hi, my name is Nick. I'm currently an intern for Debbie at Springfield Elementary. So she is the one that does all the teachings, and I'm basically sitting. I just got into the first couple classrooms today, actually. Everything's been virtual, so it was kind of a fun change of experience for me. I am totally new to all of this. I have never worked with children. I don't know anything about the schools other than what I learned, 10 years ago when I was in school. So it's just quite an experience, and I'm just trying to get some information and see how you guys have been doing things. I've been seeing how she does it, but I'm totally open to new ideas all the time and welcoming to just a different way of operating, I guess. So thank you.
Well, welcome. You're in for quite a journey when it comes to the world of education.
Yeah, I've already learned that.
Yeah. So
can I jump back in there, Shai, real quick?
Sure.
Yeah. Nick's from Springfield. He's in our district, and Debbie is a counselor there. And this is her last year, but Debbie's amazing. I mean, just amazing. She sends out second step material to other counselors, and she, so really happy that she was able to get, Nick in here and to learn some stuff. So that just shows, what a great counselor we have at one of our schools.
Yeah. And so, and again, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And Josh?
I'm an intern as well at the Michigan City area schools. I'm currently located at Lake Hill, working with Renee Hill. I have some experience with working with kids, with volunteering at the VNA, for the Phoenix Center, and being a swim instructor and a basketball coach, so I have some background, but I kind of, like Nick said, I'm new to this aspect of working with children, so I'm just here to learn.
Great, welcome to you too. And Katie?
Hello, I'm Katie Kester. I am with Missouri School Corporation. We are implementing Second Step and School Connect this year, and I'm just excited to soak up any knowledge and tips available.
Great, well, welcome to you too. And Julie? Hi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Julie Barrett from St. John's, and we are implementing Second Step, and it's my first year here in the building. We have a hybrid Monday through Thursday at school, Friday home-based, and I think since November, we've been, making sure the families and students have access online for when we have had those virtual times. I'm here to learn from everyone else and get more knowledge so we can keep improving what we're doing.
Great, and welcome to you too. And Amanda?
Hello, I'm Amanda Mcdonald. I'm one of the social workers in Michigan City area schools. I'm at 2 elementaries right now. I'm just popping in while I can, trying to hear everybody's perspectives and see what everybody has to say.
We have a wonderful team from Michigan City. that's great. And Casey?
Hi, sorry. Okay.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've on 2 devices here, so I finally got it down to 1. I am Casey Leek from Lallemere School. We are a high school, which is also a boarding school. So I have students from all over. And we are, I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning, but I assume we're just introducing ourselves. And I am running the Too Good program here for the freshman class. And I'm director of student life here.
Great. By the way, are you the 219 number? 936?
Maybe. I am on my iPad. I don't really know. I don't know.
Oh, you said you're in 2 different devices. I was wondering if that's.
Oh, I was on my computer, but I just logged off the computer because I don't have a mic or a camera. So. Okay.
Is there someone who's on the phone? Last digits are 6335. Is there someone else maybe? I see they're on mute. Okay, well.
That looks like we might have muted them, that Shannon might need to unmute them. Yep. Try that again.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. The 6335 is my number. I'm also on 2 devices. This is Maria Fruth. I am the president, CEO of the Healthcare Foundation of LaPorte.
Oh, okay.
Great to have all you guys here.
Oh, good, good. Welcome to you too. So I think that's all the school people. I want to now have the team introduce ourselves. So again, my name is Shai Fuchsman, and I'm, oh, I have the wrong email address for me. That's a typo. My email is and last name Fuchsman@edc.org. And Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Jim Vetter. Good to see you all.
And Lisa, I'm assuming that's you. It says Lisa's iPad. I'm assuming you're the one and only Lisa.
Yes, sir. That's me.
So that's our team. So I should say Jim and Lisa are part of the TA team, and Kelly is here as well.
Hi, everyone. That picture is hard to look at because COVID has been hard. My email is actually wrong on there also. So it is my first name, Kellie, .Hendricks@prevention.org, and that's how you can get a hold of me.
Great. Sorry about that. And Shannon, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Cassidy, and I will be on the back end making everything work today. So glad to be here.
Great. And Chuck Cliffgard, who is our senior advisor, isn't here today, but he he has been a great asset to the project as well. So that's our team. And I do want to now give the opportunity to, well, Mary, to you to say hi, and also to you and Maria to give any HFL updates. And then I will also let the program developers say hi as well. Oh, you're on mute, Mary.
I'm going to defer the floor to Maria. I know she wanted to say a few words to welcome everyone.
Yes, excuse me. Welcome to all of you, schools and presenters, and very excited that we are having this opportunity here today. And hopefully we're going to learn from each other. And again, I just want to, share with you the board's gratitude for the amazing work that you're doing through thick and thin, through COVID or no COVID, to benefit our children in our county. So thank you very, very much. And of course, I wanted to say a very special thank you to Mary for leading us through those uncharted waters of pandemic partners in prevention. So keep on going, Mary.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I'll just say a few words towards the end. Shall I give the time to our grantees and our wonderful curriculum developers? Absolutely.
Sure. And so before I move on, I do want to also let our three program developers who are joining us today introduce themselves as well. Matt, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Pearsall. I'm with the Second Step program and Committee for Children. I've been in a bunch of different roles, but one of the roles I've been in recently is supporting our remote and hybrid learning adaptation and supports. And that's what I'm here to talk about with y'all, among other things.
Thanks for joining us. And Craig?
Hi, everyone. I'm Craig Zettel with Boffin Life Skills Training. Been with Dr. Boffin in the program for 17 years. Wore a lot of hats in the past as well as right now, but my focus is on helping work out our adaptation, which we have some new remote learning options and other things like that. So just trying to consult and be the best partner that I can be to help others. That's it. Glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, welcome. And lastly, Laura.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Maroff, and I'm with the Too Good programs. I've been with the Mendez Foundation for almost 22 years. And I've had many different hats, but I'm definitely excited today about working with the program development team. That is my role now as the program development manager.
And again, welcome to you as well. So let me just quickly tell you about the agenda for today. So we did the welcomes and introductions, so check. When we heard from both Maria and Mary in terms of the updates from HFL, and Mary will say more towards the end. We then decided what we would do is do a brief presentation of some of the lessons that we have learned here at EDC related to what are the important considerations to keep in mind in terms of promoting social and emotional learning, broadly speaking, for students during COVID-19. So I'll do a brief presentation, and then Jim Vetter, my colleague, is going to facilitate a conversation with all three of the program developers. We have a conversation about the adaptations and the challenges and opportunities. Most importantly, let's focus on opportunities for implementing the programs during these challenging times. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to have breakout rooms. And basically the breakout rooms are going to be an opportunity for you all to have direct time with each one of the three program developers. In fact, I'm going to go to the next slide and give you a couple of instructions that I need you all to do right now. We're going to have 4 breakout rooms specifically. We're going to have Craig in room number 1 to talk about VIN life skills. We're going to have Matt in room number 2, second step, to talk about second step, and Laura is going to be in room number 3, Too Good for Drugs and Violence. Now, we know that there might be some people who are not implementing any of these programs, so I'm going to be leading a 4th group for anyone who wants to have a conversation around how do we begin planning for SEL, implementation of SEL programs in general, and SEL practices for next year. So, so those are the 4 options you will have. What I'd like you to do now to help Shannon set us up for the breakout rooms later in our webinar is for all of you to go to rename yourselves, and I'm going to give you quick instructions on how to do that. You should see the bottom of the screen, it just says participants. If you click on that, you'll see the list of participants. Your name should be at the top. If you hover by your name, you'll see it says rename. What I want you to do when you click on rename is put the number one, any of the numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4, right before your name so that we know which room to assign you. So I see my colleague Jim has already done that. So if you want to replicate what he just did, you can, and by the way, you can still keep your name. So just put 2 dash and then your name. So we still know who you are, but we know which group to assign you once we're ready for to the breakout sessions. So take a moment to do that.
And Shai, they have to pick just one, don't they?
Oh yeah, you have to pick one group. We can only assign you to one group. So
unless you're on 2 devices, then you can have.
And I'll remind you. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, yes, pick your number, and then we'll move on. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the considerations that we've gathered, some of the important elements that we've found to be very helpful for schools to be thinking about when implementing SEL. Here at EDC, when we work on with districts in general across the country around social emotional learning, we like to frame social emotional learning as being part of a multi-tiered system that has 3 tiers. And I know many of you are familiar with the concept of multi-tier system of support, MTSS. It's used in the academic context. It's used for behavior, if you're familiar with PBIS, and it can also be used in social emotional learning. And specifically, tier 1 is what we're working on with all of you through the HFL funding, which is the implementation of universal SEL programs for all students. But I also wanted to put that in the context of thinking also about additional supports you may want to put in place for those students who need additional supports. So having some sort of SEL screener or a mental health screener or SEL assessment that allows you to identify students who need additional either social emotional learning or mental health supports. And those interventions are usually offered either the tier 2 level with small group supports or the tier 3 level with mental health individual interventions. We at EDC also always focus on not only the 3 tiers, but also the foundation, which is to engage families and to engage educators. Especially during the pandemic, it is so critical that we work with our educators. I've heard many of you talk about that, and I know that all of you are thinking about it, how your educators are also struggling. We're all stressed. We're all trying to do our best. When people ask me what it's like being a teacher during COVID-19, the metaphor I use, it's like imagine going to the best surgeon in the world to operate on you, except their hands are tied behind their back. Oh, and by the way, their 3-year-old child is running around the operation room as well. That's what it's like being a teacher these days. And so we know we need to support their social emotional well-being as well. And then the other thing we talk about is how this all has to be one cohesive system. And there's some drivers that make the whole system work well together, beginning with leadership. And I know many of you are working closely with your superintendents or with your school boards, the leaders in your schools. That's such a critical element of making sure the system works well, is having the leadership, vision, and commitment. Data-driven decision-making. That's why I know there's so much of an emphasis, and Mary will back me up here with the INYS, making sure you collect data, that you have data, not only in terms of INYS, but in general, also the monitoring data that you all use. So that's another critical element. I know that we've been working with all of you on that. Effective implementation, another issue that I know we're all working with you on, how to make sure that not only you select the right program, but you implement it effectively. That there's communication and coordination. I know that's something else we're working with you all on, making sure that the classroom teachers who are implementing, or the counselors who are implementing the classroom-based programs are in touch with the mental health counselors who are working with the same kids outside of the classroom. That everyone across the 3 tiers is working together and kind of on the same page. And lastly, there's focus on equity, that we make sure that we're really implementing programs and offering supports and services to all students in an equitable way. And equitable doesn't mean that we do everything the exact same for the students, but rather that every student has what they need. And so today, obviously, we're focusing on tier 1, on those implementation programs. I also want to talk a little bit about the foundation supporting families and educators, because I know that's something else that you've all been working on as well. So first of all, so these are some of the specific things that we want you all to keep in mind beyond just implementation of the program. We'll talk about it, program implementation later as well. But I wanted to also emphasize some of the general practices that we found to be so important along with implementation of your programs. The first one being the relationships. We know that that student to adult relationship is so critical. We know from research that when students have a meaningful relationship with a trusted adult in the school, it could be a teacher, it could be a counselor, it could be, you know, the bus driver, it could be the librarian or the athletic coach. That meaningful relationship makes a huge difference in the lives of students. It increases their motivation. It allows them to increases their self-awareness and their self-esteem. And ultimately, it makes them a better student. And that leads to positive academic and health-related outcomes. That's just not anecdotal, that's based on research. So thinking about how do we intentionally and systematically make sure that every student has a meaningful relationship with at least one adult is critical. One of the resources, and we'll send you the slides, that I think is really helpful is one created by Harvard University called Virtual Relationship Mapping. It's a process by which you work with your colleagues to make sure that they identify who are the students in the school that they feel they have a meaningful relationship with. And you map it out on a virtual spreadsheet so that at the end of the process, you see exactly who are the students who have that meaningful relationship and who are the students who are falling through the cracks. Hopefully none, but if there are, you identify them and you figure out how to best engage them. And that's something that if you're interested in learning more about, talk to your TA provider, we can help you with that as well. But that's kind of a beyond the program implementation, something to think about. The other issue that I know is so, and I should say it's especially important with COVID-19. That was the point I was trying to make. It's especially important because it's harder to deal with COVID-19 when so many students are either virtual or you're going, I know many of you are going back and forth between hybrid and remote or even in person, but those transitions are not really good for keeping a relationship, a meaningful relationship. And so trying hard to think about how do we make sure those relationships are maintained even beyond all the transitions. Emotional management. You know, this is a very stressful time for all of us, much more so for kids who are just learning to develop these emotions or to manage these emotions. I know that the programs that you all are implementing and that are being presented here all talk about in one way or another emotional management. But thinking about that in particular, how do we provide different strategies for students to manage emotions, to manage stress, to manage sadness, to manage anger? Because that's such an important issue to raise to the top during COVID-19 as well. And here are a few resources that we found that are focused specifically on emotional management. Each one of these images you see that has a blue border is a link. So when you get the slides, you can actually click on them and it'll take you to the specific resource. The mood meter is a wonderful tool to check in with your students about how are they feeling. And if you click on that, you'll get more information about how you can use it in person or virtually. Heart Mind Online is a great resource, also provides some great resources on something called the Emotional Wheel that help students identify their emotions and how to support them. And then Transforming Education, an organization based here in Massachusetts, they have some specific strategies for that as well. And then I put this, the bottom right image, because this is so helpful to think about, not only for children, but even for ourselves, that different emotions require different coping mechanisms. So being able to identify what is the emotion I'm feeling right now. Am I feeling overwhelmed or is it lonely? Am I feeling sad or am I feeling frustrated? And based on that, then deciding, well, based on how I'm feeling, what is it that I need to do? And again, these are things that we can all keep in mind, not just our kids. And then again, I know that the programs that you're all implementing also have plenty of resources as well. We just wanted to supplement in case this is something you want to be thinking about in particular. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the importance of supporting adults. Again, I know that this keeps coming up in your in all of your communities, how to support parents and particularly teachers. Here at EDC, we've developed this very basic 3-circle framework on the importance of supporting adults in the school community. So it begins with self-care, right? it's important for all of us to think about, in our busy days, as we're developing lessons plans, as we're engaging with our students, as we're worried about our own kids, to also take the time to engage in self-care. And we all know about the practices that involve self-care. It's eating healthy, it's exercising, it's meditating. There's all kinds of strategies, and we can go in depth more with you as TA providers if you're interested in learning more about that. But then it's important for us to work with our colleagues to remind people the importance of self-care and to make sure everyone has a self-care plan, that they're thinking about, what am I doing for myself today? But self-care isn't enough. You can't tell teachers, you have to sleep better and you have to exercise. Oh, and by the way, we're going to just overwhelm you with work so that you have no time to do all the things that we're telling you should do for self-care. So we need to also make sure that the self-care piece exists in a broader environment that is supportive. The second layer is that relational care. So not only self-care, but also relational care. How do we make sure that teachers have the time to engage with each other and support each other? I know some of you talk about doing fun things. I know in my community, actually, at the end of every professional development, every month this year, they've taken a walk in the woods, with masks, physically distanced, but just to do something where they're doing something together and connect in a way that connects them to each other. And lastly, creating the supportive environment to make sure that the schedules allow for teachers to take those self-care breaks, to make sure that there's a beginning and end to each day, and it doesn't feel like it's just, because it's virtual, it's just ongoing. And that's something that you can work with your superintendents, your principals, to create that structure that allows for self-care and relational care. So that's our framework. Again, under each one of these, there's a whole bunch of resources and tools and strategies that we're happy to engage you with. I see, Craig, you're smiling. I'm assuming you probably have some stuff too. So if you do, we can talk, you can offer those as well. I don't know if I read your face correctly, but.
No, I'm just using my nonverbals to communicate.
Oh, okay.
I'm in line with you. That's all.
You're doing a great job. but do ask, for all the things I talked about, this is a great opportunity, having these 3 program developers, to ask them too about how their programs can offer these different supports, not only supporting adults, but also the previous topics that I raised before. So I also wanted to end my section before I turn things over to Jim and the developers, to say that beyond all these challenges and beyond all these strategies that are so important to do, we all know as TA providers, and I'm sure the HFL people will agree with us as well, we know you've been doing heroic efforts. We want to recognize it. We want to pause and kind of recognize everything you've been doing, because we as TA providers have been in complete awe and amazement of how much you've been all able to accomplish with your teams. I know many of you, despite all the transitions, have continued to implement the programs and been creative and innovative at how to adapt them. And we really appreciate that. And all the adaptations you've been making and the efforts you've been making to continue this work that is so important now more than ever. So with that, on that positive note, I wanted to pause before we move on to Jim and the program developers, to open the floor to all of you and ask you all, what are some of the things that you've done that you feel you've done well? Some of the lessons learned that you've learned, or some of the best practices or innovative practices that you have implemented as a way to either adapting your programs or just in general to adapt to the COVID-19 context. So feel free to type in the chat, or if you want to unmute. I think, Shannon, can people unmute themselves? Shannon, if you can, you unmute you. Just kidding.
Yes, people can unmute themselves.
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. So I don't know, you feel free to either raise your hand or again, type in your chat. Any specific strategies that you feel like, here's something that we've done really well that has really worked well for us?
Could I speak?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Ray.
Okay. All right, again, Ray from Michigan City. I think what helped us the most was that, like, our curriculum director and our administration built in our SEL time before the school year started. So, having that time in place already has helped us, because we started online, went back full time, then went hybrid, then we went back totally online again, and we just literally this week started back for hybrid. So I think our counselors have done just a phenomenal job, just being able to transition from, you know, one thing to the next, and you know, one phase to the next, and all of them are on a good pace, you know, to finish. We did, and we even did, like, for second step, we did the community building activities to get everything going. And even like for middle school, we do a Botman life skills, and they're the seventh grade is, or eighth grade is already complete. The seventh grade's almost complete, so we can move on to do other things. And through the, you know, through HFL and through Mary and Maria, we're able to get like a prescription drug module that we're going to be able to do also. So I think for us, it's just having, you know, that built-in time. So there was some really good decisions made before the school started that allowed us to adapt from one being at home to being hybrid to being back at school, you know, without missing too much, you know, because emotions, you know, they never go away, and all the things that the kids and the adults they never go away. So instead of scrambling and all that, I really thank our curriculum director, Kathy Bildhauser, for doing that. It was just, I think it was just a great move, and it really saved a lot of headache for us and me and a lot of other people. So that's my take.
Great, thank you so much. And I know that you guys have been, I've heard a lot about all the adaptations you've made, and it's definitely been very inspiring. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to share some. This is Sarah with the LaPorte Community School Corporation. I think that, you know, like Ray said, we have the support of our administrators, not only at the district level, but at the building levels too. And I think one of the things that has helped us, actually there's a couple things, but I want to do a shout out to our building level teacher champions, as well as our counselors and our principals. We've formed a building level SEL teams. That helps me because I can't be at all places at all time. We have 8 elementary schools at intermediate, middle, and then we also have a 9-10 program. And so they've been kind of the eyes and the ears, and they've been great for feedback loop. And we're also been very data driven. We just spent last month, actually last couple of weeks, looking at all of our data from the first semester. And then we looked at what does that data tell us? And what direction will that take us for the second semester? So I'm also established quarterly SEL building team meetings this year. So we're starting our third quarter team meeting next week, actually. And so what we'll be doing now is taking that data and showing them how to use that data that we focused on in January. And they're all going back now and putting together doable things that they could do to continue to progress, not only for our students, but now also incorporating our families. And I think the other thing that has been helpful is that self-care piece you talked about. We have monthly lunch and learns are also after school, short 35 minute SEL workshops for our staff. And so, and we focus a lot on self-care. We just did a PD day yesterday, and our preventionist for the school corporation did one on self-care. It's not the first time she's done one this year, but so we try to keep that out in front. So, you know, I think everything is really a team effort. No one could do this alone. And I'm very appreciative of the perseverance that all our players have shown this past year in adapting.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that. And I love the lunch and learn, because it's, you know, it sounds like it's brief, it's simple, but yet it can make a huge difference, that break in the day. So thank you. Anyone else want to share any other strategies before we move on to our panelists? Well, so hopefully more ideas will come up as we hear more from our program developers. I'm sure they'll offer ideas, and people will be like, oh yeah, we do that already, or yeah, we've done that. And so we'll hear more from all of you. But with that, I'll turn things over to Jim to facilitate a conversation with our program developers.
Excellent. And folks, as we were seeing what the preferences were that people were putting on for their breakouts, there were several of you that were interested in more than one of the breakouts. So what we're going to do is keep the group together so that you get to hear from everybody, so that you don't miss out on hearing about the other program that you're working with. So we're going to keep the gang all together. So you were just sharing about some really great innovations and approaches that you're using. That you also want to think about what are the kind of challenges that you're navigating along the way. That Ray mentioned about the kind of the shift from one instructional mode to another instructional mode to another instructional mode. So I'm just curious that I'd like to ask each of you on our panel, that Craig and Matt and Laura, that what would you say is sort of one key challenge that people have been contacting, that schools and districts have been contacting you about, that they're trying to navigate? That if you had to just pick one of them, what's one of the challenges that you've been hearing about from folks? So let's start with Laura.
I think probably the biggest challenge that we continuously hear about is just how do we continue this when we're not in person? A lot of people have been remote learning. And so that's probably the biggest thing that we hear is like, how do we continue when we're not seeing the kids and we're not face to face?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think I see some folks that's resonating with out there. That Matt, if you had to pick just one, and we'll talk about others too, but if you had to pick just one, what's the challenge that
I think the one that we hear about the most is really adapting a program that was meant to be done in person for remote learning, and it's not, and often it's a very technical issue. It's how do I get this content into Google Classroom? How do I build a slide deck for this program? How do I, these very kind of nuts and bolts issues that come up when you try to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, I think we've been hearing a bunch about those things. And Craig, what's one more that you've been hearing about?
I think the greatest challenge for us is everything that everyone else said, but also, or what I'm hearing is just technology in general, getting access to students on a consistent basis, attending classes, having to flip between one model to another, as you mentioned, Jim, has been a real challenge as we started out 100% remote, and during the height of COVID, flipped in the fall back and forth, and now we're in a whole different model. So I would say the uncertainty, the change, and I have to commend the resiliency of all providers, just because they're dealing with not only tech, content, fidelity, adaptation, and need support.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious too, that as we go, that folks, that as you have additional ideas, and that as you have questions for any of the developers too, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to speak up. But I'm wondering from the grantees, that go ahead and just type into the chat any other challenge. What are the challenges that you've been encountering? So feel free to think about that, and go ahead and type that in as we keep going. So you folks, the three of you talked in different ways about, right, that a key challenge, of course, makes sense, right? That here is an in-person program designed to be in person, that tested in person, and now we're at a time when maybe it's all virtual, that maybe it's hybrid. So what are a couple of the kind of the key sort of tips that you found, or things that you've either that you folks have developed and are suggesting, or that you've been learning from the communities that you've been working with? Mm-hmm. So what are maybe one or two key ideas about what makes an in-person program work virtually? So Matt, how about you?
Well, I think that the thing that we've really focused on is that sense of community that you build through a social emotional learning program. Now that's really kind of a natural part of a program, when everybody is in person and doing the activities and having the conversations around kind of the topics that come up in a program. But when you move into a remote environment, or even when you're in a hybrid and you have some kids that are in person but some kids that are remote, you have to be much more intentional about how you address that, how you build community. So that's been a lot of our focus has been around creating supports to help educators be intentional about building that. Not just because it's something that you need to work on, but also because I think a lot of SEL researchers and thought leaders have been really have come out and said that is the biggest priority during this pandemic, is the community building and maintaining a safe and supportive environment for students and their connection, their personal connection to school during a really disruptive time.
So that's interesting, because I think that a lot of us tend to think about, starting with the lessons, starting with the content, right? That how do I kind of push the content out there? How do I get the content out there? But it sounds like you're suggesting that, of course, the three of you are part of organizations that have spent an enormous amount of time and care and research developing great content and demonstrating its effectiveness. But it sounds like you're suggesting that just pushing the content out there isn't going to actually do what the program's designed to do. I'm wondering, Laura, does that resonate with you as you're thinking about the two good programs?
Absolutely. We have to remember that we are trying to teach these kids social emotional skills. And so we want to be able to continue to build those no matter how, even if it is just taking ideas and continuing to talk to the kids about it and making them interactive and helping the kids respond with those answers and knowing what they're saying and understanding that we're all going through this. And so it's definitely helpful in order to be able to do those types of activities with the kids.
And I'm wondering, Craig, that I know that Botman's life skills training that encompasses a range of social emotional skills.
Right.
And also is really focused, that the driver around it initially was around substance misuse prevention.
Right.
But so I'm wondering, how does this translation play out with a program, and yours are for older students as well.
Right. Well, I think the one thing, just if to stick with the original question too.
Yeah. How do you
From our perspective, it really is about honoring the recipe as it relates to LST. So essentially fidelity and doing the best that you can to translate what's intended in the original program and the activities to this new environment, whatever your technology may be. So and what that really means also is helping teacher understand that, let's stay focused on skills practice. It's a skills practice program. That's how behavioral change happens. Let's not backslide into methodologies or technologies in prevention that may be less effective, like lecturing or just knowledge-based transfer. So really helping them focus on that behavioral rehearsal component, with the lack of a better term, the skills part of life skills, and translating that into whatever technology they may have. So it really becomes very personalized. But at the end of the day, we're always making sure that we're doing our best to honor the fidelity as whatever we can do given the circumstances or the challenges that we're faced with.
So it sounds like that you're all talking about that part of that is the deeper the understanding the implementers, the teachers have of the core of how the program works,
right? Then
the easier it is, not that it's easy, but the easier it is to look at, okay, what are my affordances when I'm in this, if I'm in Google Classroom, or I'm using Canvas, or I'm doing whatever, that if I know how the program is supposed to work, that and how what were the kind of the key mechanisms by which it operates, then it's easier to kind of make that translation.
Exactly. So I mean, just to follow up on that, Jim, since I made the last point, like for example, in our program, you may have the initial part of a lesson is related to facilitating and understanding what students might know about it. Normally, you might use a whiteboard or display technologies in the classroom. You would just have to adapt that to a display whiteboard or a Zoom call with some other type of slide that you might. Now, we try to provide as much of the resources as we can, but we're also recognizing that not everybody has the same capability. So that's an example of that translation. If I want to ask the students a question to gauge their misunderstanding or perception and then present things, I don't have a whiteboard and I'm not physically with you, but there's lots of other ways. I guess the short answer is if you run into the wall, you can either go under it, around it, or over it. And how can I help you figure out the best way as the person who might be looking more toward fidelity?
So interesting that I'm seeing that folks in the chat, that several folks are talking about the importance of focusing on the adults. That that folks are talking about that folks have been having a lot of discussions with their TA providers and so on about the kind of pieces, the core pieces you're talking about sort of how do we make this work? How do we make this translation? But we're also hearing from a bunch of folks around the level of stress people are feeling. And I'm wondering sort of any thoughts about that. So I'm wondering, Laura, I'm wondering whether you might have any thoughts about, if taking the approach from the program, how do you then make sure that the adults get cared for?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on an adult SEL program as we speak. So yeah, this is a huge issue for everyone right now. And we have to realize that we think the kids are stressed, but we know the adults are stressed too, because now not only are they dealing with everything that they normally deal with, but now everything is different because they might be at home, or they might have to take a student somewhere or a child somewhere because they're not used to having to also teach and watch kids at the same time. So there's all kinds of stress, and we need to afford ourselves the opportunity to recognize that, know that we're stressed, and really build time in for ourselves to take care of that stress. We help our kids do it, but we also have to do it ourselves as well.
And I'm sure that Matt has some things to share about this, but I also I see Sarah has got a strategy that you're suggesting in there, in the chat. Sarah, do you want to unmute for just a second about how you're helping folks sort of feel positive?
Yeah, well, with sharing the data out, I mean, that speaks volume because our data is collected from our students, our teachers, and our parents. And I think they need to be reminded that every step and everything that they're doing, especially during times of difficulty, is making a positive difference for our kids, and our data is supporting that. And so in our last round of meetings, I encouraged them to share at the individual building sites, the staff, the data, and how it supports the fact that what they're doing is making a positive difference in the kids' lives. And some of the feedback that we have had from that is just, I think, gratitude from the teachers to hear something positive when their days are often stressful. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is when we collected teacher data, I asked the teachers to share what incidents that support that they've seen that SELs are making a difference in their classrooms, in their schools, and so forth. And in that, I mean, I probably had at least 100 comments from teachers regarding that. And so I developed a SEL staff newsletter that I'm publishing monthly. And in that newsletter, I purposely use that teacher voice so that they're aware that other teachers are seeing differences in a good way in the buildings too. So I just need to keep that out in front of them. And so I'm just trying different ways to do that.
That's interesting. So really helping folks understand the impact, the positive impact that they're making, which I think is part of the reason why folks sometimes feel that if folks didn't care, they wouldn't feel as frustrated, right? So it sounds like you're building on the fact that educators are really committed. And I'm wondering, Matt, I know that you facilitate a global online conversation about all this. That I'm wondering, is this a theme that you see coming up for folks, and what are some approaches that you're looking at?
Yeah, and I think that so there's a lot of conversations that I've seen in kind of in online communities of practice and for educators around this. And also we had the opportunity last fall at Committee for Children. We did an open pilot of an adult SEL program, so we were able to get a lot of feedback from that. And I think that there's a lot of different strategies. There's some strategies that we were using, and there's a lot of other strategies out there. I think that nobody's lacking in strategies for kind of for supporting adult social emotional well-being right now. But the thing that keeps coming back is time. I think that's the big kind of, I don't know, the elephant in the room. That was when we did our open pilot, we got a lot of feedback saying, this is great, but I don't have any time to do this. This would be great if it wasn't another thing added on top of of all the stuff that I'm already doing. And that's the thing that I hear the most is that the biggest thing that can offer to support educators' well-being right now is time. And that's both very simple and very hard to do. So some stuff that I've seen that people have been very appreciative of and felt helpless. Any meeting that can be put in an email, put it in an email. Any time that you can give back to educators is welcome and helps them actually be able to put that theory of work-life balance into practice, because everybody's really overwhelmed right now, as we're all well aware.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, and I know that that's a key issue for a lot of communities, a lot of folks, that I'm wondering how folks here, grantees who are here, how are you handling that? What kind of strategies are you using when you're trying to help people navigate the amount of time it takes to develop what's going to be the virtual version, what's going to be the hybrid version, are we coming back and all that? Are there strategies you found that's been helping that work for individual teachers? And I'm wondering, Ray, you were mentioning that your folks seem to have made some fairly smooth transitions, and I'm wondering if there are things that and actually you talked about even just having the time protected sort of in the schedule, but any of the things that you found useful in terms of prep?
Yes, the principals have been really good about giving counselors time and allowing them to transition from one to the other to the next if they need that. So again, it's like Sarah was saying, there's a lot of thanks to go around. But I do want to piggyback on something that Craig had said earlier, which I thought was great, was about the skills based, like with the Botman system. It's just, I love like the workbooks, in Botman, because I think there's just something beautiful about pencil to paper, to be able to go, yes, it's not the most advanced, technology thing in the world. People but we try to promote also too, where, they're doing that, but it's also a form of like journaling, yes, which can also be used, for our adults, and there's just something, magical, I think, about, having something down, because how else are you going to know something works if you don't kind of record it in history? And it's just things that you can, keep, forever. So I think that really resonated with me when he talked about, and also just the whole fact about just skills based, just going over it over again. I mean, a lot of this stuff is not rocket science, what we teach, but we need to sound like a broken record sometimes. Right. And I know a lot of my people, like when I was a social worker in the middle school, you sound like a broken record, Mr. Silves. You say that over and over, but you know what? 7 months later, they come back and like, oh, I'm so glad, I wanted to hit that kid in the face or something, just like, so it's just just something about that skill-based practice, that repetitiveness that you do. And just like even with Second Step, you have that week to reinforce the activity. I just think, and I know people say time, but we have to figure out how to just make the time, or make it a priority, and really push that. And like Sarah was saying with that data and all that, maybe that's our way of, pushing where we can get more time, because just a few minutes of time at the beginning could probably save a lot of time redirecting and discipline issues later on, in the hour or whatever class it's in. But again, I just really thought what Craig was talking about, I took down I probably got a page of notes just off that sentence he said, just made me remind me of things that, I can do to improve. So I really appreciate that.
Can I add something to that, Jim, real quick? I was just going to say, Ray.
And then it looks like Sarah might want to weigh in too. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, I was just going to say quick, Ray, I'm glad that you picked up on that, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of the other programs are built on the same psychological theories and things like that, but that's a therapeutic technique that's used with adults CBT, et cetera, that's been there for 30 years, and that hasn't changed how people learn. Because the number one question I get about the worksheets is, how do we put these in Google Docs or other things? That doesn't always replicate that same process, like you said, mind to pen, hand to pen to paper, and it is directly related to the skills. So it's interesting. I appreciate you picking up on that, and thank you for expanding on that. That's an important part of the skill building.
So Craig, would you say that handwriting is a critical part of the program?
I wouldn't say it's a critical part, but not everybody learns the same way. And I know Matt's background as a teacher and professional trainer, he'd probably expand on this more, but everybody has a personal learning style, but also the difference, it really comes down to the difference between a behavioral rehearsal for us and a role play. You can do a role play with lots of people. You can do a behavioral rehearsal by yourself. So just different things like that. So the worksheets are an important part, and that is the program. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I'll just put it in another format, without thinking, is this honoring and serving the same original intent that's been proven effective? That's all. I guess the other comment I was making really related to what Ray was just saying is, by keeping the focus on the skills, because when we're strapped for time, again, this time thing, everybody's looking to get resources. And then the next thing you know, decision-making becomes a video-based lesson on showing people making decisions and less about practicing the decisions. So it's just trying to help them stay on that and then be there as often as we can to help.
So I'm going to go to Sarah in just a second, but I'm wondering that, Craig, you're talking about the importance of that kind of engagement and interaction, right? The kind of active learning piece of it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for the others of you as well, that what are examples of how you've seen people translate sort of an engagement or interaction into any of these virtual formats? How have you seen it work?
Well, I've seen really awesome adaptations of activities from our program to using things like Jamboard or where'd it go? The video one that everybody uses. That's well, that one too. Never mind. But as soon as I say that, there's a bajillion different things that'll come forward. But I've seen them using ways to kind of to make an interactive experience for kids, so that there's something that they can do on their end, whether it's writing a little sticky note and sticking it up on a virtual board, or it's recording themselves and putting that in a place where other people can watch it and respond to it. And those are simple translations. When you look at the activity, you go, oh, it's not that different than it was, but it's just using this digital platform in order to make it a thing, so that kids can then have that, not the same experience they would have had in the classroom, but a similar experience. And also a way to, when you have some kids that are in person and some kids that are out, to not have to have a separate experience for everybody. The kids that are in person can do this in the classroom just like the kids that are at home can do it. And not only have I seen people doing that, but I've seen some educators saying, this works better than it did before because I'm able to get more kids participating than I would have been able to do it before when it was a classroom discussion. You're muted, Jim.
That's interesting. So, using some of these kind of interaction tools, and I'd be interested if folks, grantee folks, that if you would type in the chat, sort of what are the kinds of online interactive tools that you're using, either for one of these programs or just for student engagement in general, because I know folks are using a bunch of tools that they've been finding useful. But sometimes by translating to online, we actually increase engagement. Right? Sometimes that a student who may be a little hesitant.
Right.
So they're using Google Classroom, so that might actually step forward in a way, because in a way everyone's kind of got a front row seat in the class when they're online together. So Laura, I'm wondering if you might have an example of what an interaction might look like, what a meaningful online interaction.
we've seen people are just so creative, and it's so great with things that people have done, whether it's using the puppets in our early elementary grades in order to engage the kids and get them interacting with it, or even some of our activities. Yes, they're designed in a classroom, but they can still be run in the digital platforms. So even some of our communication activities, some of our games, they're still setting those up, they're still doing them, they're still playing them. It's just that the students are in different locations, or the students aren't all working together like we want them to and like we practice, but they're still engaging with each other, and they're still interacting and answering questions and playing the games and doing the activities. So they're still building those skills, they're still doing those things. It's just that we've had to make small adaptations so that they fit the environment that we're in.
Well, and interesting too that the kind of examples you are giving, that so it's really about thinking about, again, as educators do all the time, right? It's thinking about what is the process that we want students to go through. So it's not so important that the student clicks, right? That is just interacting in some way, is moving the mouse. That it's really, what is the process that's going on inside the student to do that? So if I'm putting stickies up, that what am I putting stickies up about? So, okay, I have a scenario that maybe I see the puppet scenario of some conflict, and then I'm going to brainstorm what are possible solutions to that conflict. So I put my sticky up there with my possible solution, and then we go through and we sort out what might happen if we tried each one of these. And we kind of predict and prioritize. So again, the students are interacting, they're grabbing that digital white sticky note, they're moving around, but they're not just moving to move, they're moving it because there's a process that's going on in their mind, sort of what you were talking about, Ray, that what's the kind of behavioral rehearsal that I'm doing here? When this happens to me, then when I'm in this situation, what am I going to then remember? What's the process I'm going to use? And Sarah, I'm wondering whether, coming back around to you, I know it was a little while ago that you had, I think, a comment you wanted to share, an idea?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the element of time, because I do think that that's probably one of the more challenging things that you hear the staff talk about. And so in our last round of meetings, when we were looking at and analyzing our data and trying to bring up, make some plans for the second semester and strategies to use, what I tried to reemphasize and repeat it in our meetings was, it doesn't have to be a grand scheme. It doesn't have to be a grand plan. It's sometimes the little things that can make the difference. So finding ways to, and some of these things you and I discussed already, Jim, in our consultation meetings. So I put those kind of things out there, but I wanted them to own it. So I did not tell them what they needed to do at their buildings, because if they can own it, then we know that the follow through will be more likely, more successful. And so even since we finished our meetings last week, we had, like I said, a PD day yesterday. I'm already hearing some of the ideas that they're using, and they're instead of, I was a little concerned that maybe this wasn't probably the best time to bring out and looking at other strategies, but I found them to be receptive. So that element of time, I think, really is a huge consideration for our staff, because we have flipped back between in-person learning to hybrid learning to totally remote learning, and that's hard. It's hard for our staff, and I'm proud of how much they've done and been able to accomplish. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that on that kind of time piece, on the part of time, that what I've noticed, and I know that in the online community that you facilitate, Matt, I've seen this happen, and I'm sure that the other developers have seen this in other ways, is how generous educators have been in sharing with each other. So
yeah, it's been really neat. I think in our, we have a Facebook community that we maintain for user second step program, and in that, educators have really come together to share resources, stuff they've put together. It's nice because they're doing things that we couldn't do ourselves for various legally copyrighty reasons. We can't do some of the stuff that they're doing, but they are, and they're doing it. And I think it's great to be able to see people coming together and supporting each other to essentially crowdsource some of the adaptation work that is needed to make these programs, make our program work in a remote environment.
Yeah, and I've seen really interesting things that people are doing in schools and districts around that, where people will divvy up the lessons, and that if we're going to translate this lesson into a structure of Google Classroom, that somebody does these set of lessons, somebody does this set of lessons, but or the counselor may have some time, may not have any time, but may have some time, might be able to prepare things that then teachers can use and so on. That seems to have been helping and really appreciated. So I'm curious that that for those of you who are grantees out there, as you're listening to these fabulous folks and the experience that you've had with the programs, that any questions that you might have of the developers as you're in the midst of navigating all this, what are some of the things that you might want to know from them? So feel free to think about that. And then feel free to, as we keep going here, to type those in the chat or just unmute yourself and speak up.
Jim, can I just make a comment related to time?
Yeah, sure.
I think one of the things that I have to remind myself, and I'm sure my peers out there are in the same position, but if you think about it, it feels like we've been under COVID conditions forever, but really everything crashed and bounced around like a bouncing ball ever since last March. So the vast majority of the educational field is not technical. I can probably say that. And if you think about it in terms of adaptation and the amount of time, I don't get a lot of comments from teachers these days related to the program's too long, because now that they have to come up with content, they've got plenty of content. But imagine it from the teacher's perspective, and this is why I'm always thankful to them. And I'll explain that in more detail. They not only have to find the technology, oftentimes that they like, that they can use, they have to learn it, they have to deploy it, and then they have to hope that it is understandable for the student. And then come back, the student just gets tossed this stuff and it may not be the best. So having to go through that Google Classroom is great when we can collaborate, but maybe each person has their own adaptation. So that takes a lot of time. I've had to adopt software myself, and all of a sudden you think you got it down. And I know maybe some others can attest to this. The other person that I think should be thanked, and let's just do it for their SEL sake, is the IT coordinators at school districts. Their life went backwards and upside down and everything, because I can't tell you how many times I'm actually helping a teacher who just got a new Chromebook, which looks totally different than a PC. And it's because this went deployed district-wide. So they had to solve the solution for all students, not just, and all teachers at the same time, not just those individuals. So I'm by no means an IT expert, but I've really come to appreciate, as we move forward, the challenges that they had to face just to allow us to try and translate a lesson or get something, because it's just there. So anyway, I'll leave it to questions for the rest of it, but I just wanted to say time is a big issue. It always has been, even under non-COVID. But I think one of the challenges I see is that if you adopt a technology, that's great, but are you given adequate enough time to get professional development on that, maximizing and just using that technology, or is it just something that you learn on the fly, which may or may not be the case?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and as folks are giving kudos and thank yous to folks who are doing this kind of work, that Casey talked about in the chat about the kind of the energy of the teachers. That Casey, do you want to say a little more about that? Are you someplace where you can unmute? Or maybe not. Casey may be in the midst with lots of students and the bell going. Oh, there you go. Okay, great.
Sorry. And I have it up on 2 screens. Sorry. I was dealing with a student real fast. Yeah. Yeah, the job never ends.
You just made a comment about the energy of the teachers and what positive impact that is.
So that is, I'm actually the teacher. I do it all. And So that is the one thing that the kids constantly comment on, is just that I am so excited for it because it's at an additional time. So freshmen have to stay an hour extra after school one day to complete this program. So I just think it's all about my attitude with it. And I know I'm in a unique situation. We've been in person this entire time. So I have not had the very many remote kids. But even with the remote kids, they have to call, we call on them, and they're excited because we're excited. And they like to laugh at adults. So I don't mind them laughing at me. But morale is the toughest part.
Well, and I think, Casey, the point you're making too really goes to a little bit about that and the self-care piece, that, if we are just so focused, as it's really easy to be, about trying to navigate this technology and just kind of push out the content and get one more lesson in there and all that, and miss the kind of piece that folks have been talking about really engaging with the students and developing the relationship and sharing the kind of the feeling and excitement that we typically would with any kind of learning, but particularly with social emotional learning. So I'm wondering that if folks as developers, that I know that for Too Good, I know that for life skills, I know that for Second Step, that folks have been that you developers have been developing some supports that you're offering for folks who are using the programs in this amazing and insane time. And I'm wondering if each of you could say just a little bit about what are the kinds of supports for COVID-19 context that you folks are providing, and starting with Laura, if I could.
Yeah, we've tried to provide every opportunity for them, whether it's videos, live videos, whether it's pre-recorded videos. We do have some people who are able to meet in person. They just have to meet the social distancing requirements. So on our website, we've come up with a variety of ways that they can meet all of those different types of domains that they're actually teaching in. Try to provide them with as much information as we can. One of the biggest things that we always get from people is like, how do we engage the students when we're on a video or when we're pre-recorded? And so we've even come up with tips for how can we keep those students engaged, and what can we do to engage students when it's real easy for them to turn the camera off and take a nap.
Mm-hmm. And do you know off the top of your head one or two of those tips you could share?
I think we have prevention specialists on staff, and we have a prevention specialist that came up with some great ideas. And the one that I remember from her is she just arbitrarily calls students by name. And so it's not like she's forcing her kids to actually pay attention and to listen. And that way they don't just raise their hand to interact on the platform that she's on or anything. They actually do. She calls them by name, and they have to be able to answer questions. So it keeps them constantly listening. The other thing she loves to do is make them laugh. Like the last person said, that kids love to laugh at them. And I think that also helps her. Like, it's her little stress management way of dealing with it, is making it fun. And then the kids appreciate it too.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like particularly with these kind of programs that where a lot of the questions may be open-ended, that there may not be a right or wrong answer, that then calling on an individual student can be in that same kind of welcoming environment, where that it can be a situation where there's no way to get it wrong. That, what's a time that you've seen in your neighborhood that someone has had a problem like this? Okay, well, could be a lot of answers to that. So you could call on any of us and we would have an answer to that. But, so Craig, I'm wondering for Botman life skills training, that what are some of the kind of supports? That,
we're offering a lot of the same. The goal is to, and we invite everybody, let's work through the problem together. Count us as your teaching assistant, if you will, somebody to bounce ideas off of no matter what. But on those lines, I mean, just in terms of tips, and engagement is something we hear a lot about. Some of the fun things that I've heard teachers do, and I've seen a few, which is really fun, is rather than just start out with prevention, just do something for the first 2 minutes that has maybe nothing to do with the lesson topic. I had one teacher who likes to put up a dad joke. All the kids would think it's corny, but it gets their attention. Other ones, for example, this was pretty interesting. They would have a different theme, but he said, I want you to use your background with a classroom appropriate dream vacation destination. So kids put up pictures of the beach, the mountains, stuff like that. And then another time was places that you visited or your favorite pet or any of those things. There you go, Jim. See? Now I'm going to ask you, have you ever been to San Francisco?
I have been to San Francisco and
all right, great.
Really loved it there. But my dream vacation I haven't been on yet.
Wow. See, you're a lot more tech savvy than most that I work with. You could flip around backgrounds. But yeah, so little things like that is not something that we like to share those tips when we find them. And they usually come from general educators, to be honest with you. But it ties in my opinion, with, we're all dealing with a lot at the same time and we're stressed, but sometimes a little levity goes a long way. Mm-hmm. And it also gets them like, what's going to happen this lesson? And the good news is if you're teaching LSD, you need 15 and then just recycle the same 15 next time. Toss the best or keep the best, toss the rest, so to speak.
Nice. And Matt, how about with the Committee for Children for Second Step?
Well, there's a bunch of different stuff that we've made. I'm going to throw in the chat here a link to the webpage. We've got a lot of the stuff that we've put together over the last year. And couple things I really wanted to call out. The first one was the community building materials that Ray mentioned actually when he was talking. Thank you, Ray. I was really excited to hear that you were using them. Kind of along the lines of what I was talking about earlier, we really feel like there's a focus that intentionality around community building that isn't present in Second Step because we really rely on that classroom interaction to do that. So we created resources both for remote and in-person use to really be intentional about community building. And so those are there. They're completely free. Anybody can use them. They're based on Second Step, but they don't require the program. So they're up there. Other resource that I think is a really useful one that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on is our Mind Yeti mindfulness program, which was actually defunct. We had it and we took it down. We brought a bunch of it back and made it free. So it's available from that page I put up there. You can find it available on a variety of different platforms for free. Also, incidentally, it's also if any of your schools are using Seesaw, it's now integrated into Seesaw as well. So there's a couple different places to use that. And finally, you also find a link in there is a podcast that we launched recently called the Imagine Neighborhood Podcast, which is a social emotional learning. It's free. It's a social emotional learning podcast designed for kids ages 5 to 9 or 10 to listen to with their families to be able to learn social emotional learning skills together. In general, it's a really neat podcast. We've done a lot of content specifically around the pandemic and COVID-19, as well as right now we're launching a series on equity and anti-racism. So that's another resource that I think works really well in this environment that a lot of educators are using in their classroom as well, even though it was meant originally for families. So those are a few that I wanted to highlight. And there's a lot of stuff there. Feel free to look through it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you, Matt. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Laura. And Shai, it's over to you.
Great. Thank you. I'll add my my thanks too. Thanks, Matt, Craig, and Laura for joining us today and for all your amazing insights into how to implement these programs in the current situation. I also wanted to thank all of you, the grantees, for participating in this conversation, for adding your voice to the conversation. I hope it was helpful to you. Before we end, I wanted to open the floor to Mary. I know that you had some, if you have any updates or any closing remarks.
Okay, unmute. I'm unmuted.
Oh, you're good. You're
There
good.
you go. I got it. No, I just wanted to thank everyone very much for participating and the insight and guidance from the curriculum developers. Very insightful. Thank you for being part of the program today. I do appreciate that. I like the tips. Anything to get the kids in, to engage and stay engaged. And I do believe that I've used this, call on their name. Yeah, that works. As for adult learners as well. it does work. Also want to thank Jim Vetter for facilitating today. Very good, thank you. And Shai and EDC and Shannon, my friend Shannon, for the logistical pieces that are also sometimes very cumbersome. I know that, believe me. And no, I appreciate everyone being on board with this. We are a team, a very solid team. We have to learn from each other. We can't do it alone. As Maria always tells me, we can't do this alone. It takes a village. And that's who we are. We are the village. And I do appreciate that very much. I learned a lot. I loved it. I'm into adult learning. I have a background in supervisor management training. So a lot of the fun things I did with adults, I translate to the kids as well. I can share it another time. And so everyone, any other questions? Any other comments, please? In the chat box, I'm going to look here. Craig said, thanks. Need more info. I think everybody, all the curriculum developers here are offering their support. I appreciate that. Resources, amazing. I'm on your websites constantly, looking and learning. And everybody's doing a super job despite the circumstance. God bless you all and all the work that you do. It's amazing, super amazing.
Great, thank you, Mary, for all your support on this journey that we're all through. So just a quick reminder, if there are any ideas, any questions that emerged during this conversation, reach out to your TA provider. We're here. We're always happy to help. If you need more resources or tools, let us know. I see that the program developers have also offered all their tools, so feel free to reach out to them, check out their links. And with that, I know we have a few minutes. We're ending a few minutes early, so we'll give you a couple more extra minutes to your time. I know that's, like as we discussed, that's very valuable. The best gift you can sometimes get is the gift of time. So with that, again, thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Very good, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Lisa and Kelly. I did